Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is forms. And form elements are really, if we go look them up quick, little boxes or tick marks or submit buttons or things like that, these form elements that we can put data in and submit them and have them go somewhere. And this form data looks like it grabbed the first name and last name and saw that we typed in Mickey Mouse. And places where we would see this, saying earlier, something like Facebook, I might type in, my email address and some kind of password and hit login. And then it would send that data that I typed in back to a server, and that server would say, oh, is this username and password correct? And can I use this? And so you're interacting with something somehow. Does anybody in here, if I said what is the most common form online today that is being used, does anybody have any ideas what that might be? Think of like the pages you use most. Probably 4 to 5 billion times a day by the internet as a whole. Where would you guys say that might be? Okay, even more so than that.
Create account.
Think of a specific website that uses a form that you guys probably use all the time. Google, we've got it right here in front of us. Do you guys think that that is probably the most common form box right there? And this isn't Google, this is Chrome. I mean, if I go to google.com there, that's it right there. But that is a form element right here. Those are form buttons that are put in. That's another little form element where I click and it does something. But those are form elements, all right? And what happens, we pull up the client server model we've been talking about on and off over the semester, more so at the beginning. You guys are out here and you guys say, all right, I'm going to go out and go to the internet, go pull up google.com, it returns a page back to you, and then you guys type out a form element and then sends that form element back to the server. Server does something with that and then sends it back. Now, we are not in this class going to get into that back-end code, as much as far as processing goes. But if you guys ever decide to take the next class, like the Web Design 2 class, or some of our other classes in here, we start dipping into that a little bit and saying, all right, well, we've accepted, the username mcurl@gmail.com and the password, whatever, and then if it is, the right password, then we'll start, we'll return the web page or something like that, okay? But we're not going to get into that type of programming yet. We're just going to teach you guys how to interface with those, so when that time comes, you can. Does that make sense? And those, again, are forms. Okay, so let's make our first form. So I'm going to go down on our page, and we'll go down to wherever our main section is right here. Right here. And to build a form, we just start out with the form tags, like so. Okay, and inside our form, we are going to have different types of inputs or text boxes or different things, but the most common is the input tag, and there's many different types of input tags. And so to give them different types, we're going to use the attribute type, and then we're going to select the type of input box we want. And the most common is just a text box, like so. And we'll save that, and we'll refresh the page, and you can see we now have a box here that we can just type in. Now there's some problems here. One, how do I submit? 2, where does it send it? And how does it send it? And how do I distinguish that text box from another text box? So these are all some problems that can come into play. So the first one let's talk about is we need to have some kind of submit button that says once we type that in, we can click submit and something happens. So that requires another type of input type, and that is a submit button, like so. Okay. All right, we'll refresh that and look at that, and you can see we now have a submit. So I can type out something, I can hit submit, and it took me back to the home page. So that was weird. You know, I didn't really go anywhere. It just looped me back around to the home page when I hit submit. So I don't want that. I actually want to go somewhere. Now, for your homework, there is a URL on there that it's going to have you guys go out to. Here. And you guys can use that right now. Well, we'll use it for testing, but for your assignment, you guys will use this. And it's http://cit.dixie.edu/web/1400/mail.php. And if I just go to that page, it pulls this up. And it says there's no data received from your form. Make sure you define a name attribute for it. And so there's actually a little bit of error checking in this page. This is a page I made that said, look at what data is coming, and based on certain criteria, just give them a little bit of feedback. So you can actually use this to help troubleshoot your own homework, okay? So what we're going to do is we're now going to make it so when I hit submit, it goes to that page, all right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to give it an action, and an action is the location of where, and I need to just put in that, where we are going to go if we hit submit. Okay, you guys all with me? So I'll save that, come back here, we'll go back to our page, we'll refresh it so it gets that new thing, and I'll come in here and I'll type out something, I'll hit submit, and it went to that page. Okay. Now, it is sending it there, but if I was to come in here, and we'll just add a break, and do another one, do a bunch of them, maybe in front of each one we'll say something like email, and we could have password, and we could have something like name, and or maybe like cell, something like that. There's different types of data we're trying to pass in here now, right? And that's going to look simple like this. You can see email, password, name, and cell. And I can type in something for each of these, maybe curl at Gmail and some password there, and Matt curl, and some kind of cell phone. Here we go. And I hit submit, and it went back to here, but it actually didn't send any data, okay? And so the question I pose right now is, how do I differentiate between these, okay? How do I know that this belongs to an email, or that this is a password, or this is a name, or that this is a cell phone? And this is the next element that is kind of required. So what we do here is we say name equals, and then we can just say something. And think of this like a variable name. You guys have taken algebra perhaps, and you said x equals 5, and if I say anytime I want to display 5, I'd say display x, right? Or I could say display email, and it would show whatever I typed into that email box. And so I've got to do this for all of them. I could say name equals my password, or just password. It's really whatever you want to come up with here. You can make this up. So say name equals name. That's kind of weird, but we're trying to capture their name. And name equals cell, something like that. So let's save that this time. Let's refresh the page. Let's go through and type out something here. Pretend that's a cell phone. I'm going to hit submit. And now some of that data is actually coming through. You can show that it's received. Email equals mcurl@gmail.com. Password equals that. Name equals Matt, and cell equals that. Now if I was logging in, do I need to have that password in order to check it across the saved password that I have? I would, right? That make sense to you guys? Like the server would need that password. Okay. It would need that email address, and it would need to know some information to see if I'm logging in right or if it's saving data or whatever. But based on this page right here, and if you exclude these 4 lines right here, do you guys see any security problems that might arise on this page right here? Where are you guys seeing that? What's that? Where? Right here? But if you exclude this data right here, like let's say I'm covering that up, do you guys see any problems at all where my password could be compromised? Yes and no. Does anybody else see it right now? It's actually being displayed somewhere else. Does anybody see where that's being displayed? The URL. It's up here. Password equals 123412. Okay. Now the problem with this right now is this. This is being saved to my history. Okay. This between my computer and another computer somewhere online might also be being looked at. If I go out and I say I want to go look at yahoo.com or something and I hit go, as it goes across from my computer over to the Yahoo servers, it hits like all these routers along the way. Remember we talked about, that submarine map we showed you guys and all these backbones? It's jumping all around, and every time I jump, is that URL being passed on until it hits that server? It could be, right? And so this is a little bit of a security issue, right? Like this is a problem. I don't want this to be inside the URL as it goes from one page to another page, and it's going around the internet, because people can see this. I remember I used to work at an ISP, and I could go, look and see what traffic's coming through our servers, and I could literally see and render back out what people were doing. I mean, you guys could, if you have an open access point and traffic isn't being looked at, isn't being protected, you guys can go grab Wireshark and see what people are doing on their computers and kind of sniff and packet sniff some of that information on what they're doing. There's a lot of stuff out there and tools that can kind of intercept traffic, and I don't want anybody getting my ultra secure password, as you guys can see here, right? All right, so this is where we play into the next thing that's kind of required, and you can see here the following get variables were received. You may want to verify if you should be using get or post, and we're going to talk about that right now. And so the next thing we need to do is change the method that the data is being sent on. And by default, everything goes to the method or through the method get. Okay, that's the default. If I do not specify the method, it's going to use get, and it's going to display your passwords up in this area. The other is called post. I'll save that. We'll go back. We'll refresh the page so we get a new version. I'll go through here and type out some data really quick. I'll hit submit. And you'll notice that information is no longer up in the URL. But it is being received by the server. So it is being hidden along the way. Now, we've given you a great, best case scenario here on when to use post, and the reason you'd use that is if you're sending secure data, credit card information, social security numbers, passwords, stuff like that. Okay. Can anybody identify a time when you would actually want to use get, like an appropriate time to use get? Think about, like, are there times you would want to have a bunch of data up in the URL? And you probably don't want secure data. So data that you're okay sharing with the world. Does anything come to mind? I'll give you a few. Perfect. Okay, I type out monkeys. Okay, and I love monkeys, and I used to actually have a pet monkey for a little while, for like 4 or 5 months. It was awesome. His name was Mono. What you can do is I could copy that. okay? And I could go over to this tab and I could paste that. Now, if I didn't have all this information up here inside my header, okay, would that come up when I hit that? It wouldn't, right? And you can see like this information, you know, if I change that over to like apes, and I may have to match this one when I hit enter, you see how that changed. Like it's actually sending data that Google can use now to, you know, search specific queries. I don't even think any of that's needed. I think just that one right there, apes will work, and I could change that out to, you know, Dixie or whatever, and it will automatically pull it. But it's actually doing that up there, and so there's times where I do want to have that in my history. I might want to share a URL with somebody, and I want to have that data coming through. So there's definitely times where that's needed. If I go back to get, and let's look at this again. Hit submit. The way this works is it will give the URL, okay? We have our mail.php, and then it'll feed in a question mark. And the question mark says basically, I'm going to start feeding in some variables right now. And the first variable is going to be called email. And it's equal to mcurl@gmail.com. Ampersand, that means another variable. And the next variable is password, and it's equal to 123412. And then we're going to do another variable, name equals Matt. And then we're going to do another variable, cell equals whatever. And so when you see something like this, okay, type this out, you can read this. You can see question mark, first variable is called safe, and it's equal to active. And then we're going to do a little @ sign, which means, whoops, @ sign, which means look at a new variable. The variable's name is EI equals, and then that is equal to that piece of text right there. And so now you can start reading this data inside of your URL to know what variable names and what data is being passed back to Google. And they're sending this in a get method, most likely. And you can look at this stuff. So that's what that is. If you've ever wondered what all this garbage stuff is, I mean, it's really right there. You can see that that's a variable name, and that right there is its variable data. All right, let's move on. So for your homework, everybody needs a few things. I think like 4, maybe 5 things. 1, you need to have an action. Where is this going? 2, you need to have some kind of method. In the case of the homework, you're going to need to make it post. Number 3, you need to have names within your inputs or whatever you're passing data through. If you do not have a name, it's not associating it with anything. Number 4 might be you need a submit button to like say I'm going to submit this thing and it's going to activate and send the data. There's actually lots of other ways around this, but it's fine. And then 5, you just need to maybe have like your inputs and your forms and things like that. Okay, is everybody clear on that? Those are the concrete elements that are needed in order to make this thing function. So what we're going to do, a big chunk of the rest of class, is we're going to show you guys the different ways to input our form data. But really, it all comes down to those 4, maybe 5 different elements that you need to have on your page in order to make this function. All right, let me see here if I'm missing anything. The most common types of form elements are our input. We're going to do some of those. Our text areas, and we'll do some of those. We'll have select boxes, and we'll have options. And we'll talk about each of those as we kind of move along in here. We're also going to talk about how to make them look nicer. We have an input box right now that we're using. And if we come over to my CSS, I want this input box, number 1, I want that text to be larger. So what selector would you guys suggest I use to make that larger? I want to make that input box, that input text bigger, what selector am I going to use here? You could use form, but it's mostly affecting the form as a whole, but input has its own default sizes that you need to override. So what do you guys think that a good selector might be? If I want to affect the text within an input box, what selector do I use? I gave a lot of really like keywords there. I would want to just use the input, okay? You guys are killing me. It really is early for you, huh? Okay, so input, all right? And if I want to affect its font size, what declaration would I want to use? Fonts, oh, you guys are good. Okay, and so maybe we could do something like, let's say 1.5 rem on that, okay? So we'll look at those, and when I type them in, they're bigger now, right? Maybe that's a little too big. Maybe we want to go like 1.2 or something like that. Now, if I wanted to have some more space within this box, so it's not so crushed, okay, what could I do to that? Add some padding. And do I apply it to an input or something else? What do you guys think? The input is this box that goes around that's in blue. That's your hint. Yeah, I'd want to use input again. Okay, good. So let's do padding, something like, I don't know, let's look at 10 pixels and see what that looks like. Okay, so saving. So it opens up a little bit more. Does that look a little cleaner, a little easier to read? I don't know if I like 1.2, maybe even just 1 rem. Let's look at that. Yeah, I like that better. That feels better than the little crushed box we had before. Okay, good. So, you know, and we can do things like, we could do like an input colon active. And maybe we want to give it a background color of like light gray or something. Oh no, not active, focus. And so when I click on it, do you see how it's a little gray now? To kind of show that I'm currently on that one, I'm focused on it. Okay, you guys see how that works? You could also do like a hover if I hover over the top of it without doing anything. So I could do like an and input colon hover. Something like that could also be given that same styling. So you can see where my hover now is kind of showing that that's active. I click on it and it becomes gray. So there's a lot of really, you know, CSS that we can apply to our forms early on. Let's show you guys, well, before we move on, let's maybe even give these a width. So let's start, well, let's not do that. Let's do like 300 pixels or something like that. You know, let's not do that. Let's say that this is going to be, oh no, I could go 300 pixels, that's fine. And they're a little bit bigger. Okay. Now with forms, there's a lot of other attributes we can give them. Okay, so we'll talk about some different types. First one we can change here. We can change our type from text over to email. We'll show what that does. We can change this password over to be something called password. We can change the cell phone to be, I think it's tel. I'm going to have to go double check that one. I don't know if it's fully, let's go look it up. If you guys ever want to know if you can use something, you just look up can I use, and there's this website that will tell you what browsers support what things. So if I look at email, telephone, or URL types, you can see that currently Internet Explorer, Edge, Firefox, Chrome, and it'll go through all the browsers, including mobile browsers, who supports it. So right now, Opera Mini is the only one that doesn't. So I should be able to use that tel that I used right here, I think. So we'll look at those. I'll refresh it, and it looks the same. And now, if I type in something that doesn't look like an email and I hit submit, do you notice how it says you need to include the @ sign? So there's a little bit of validation going on here. So I could say @gmail.com, and I can submit that one, and that will go through. Password. If I start typing in stuff, it now masks that so people can't see what I'm doing. Fun fact, if you ever want to screw with your friends and they've got a password mask like this, you can always just go back into inspect. And we've been using inspect. Inspect, the great thing is it will let you go in and adjust CSS. Maybe I want to make those really big or whatever and change padding. But you can always come back in HTML and type out text there and see their password they're typing in. Again, inspect gives you a lot of cool little features there, but that's just a side note. Cell, it's going to try to look for some kind of cell phone. Oh, that one's not. It will identify it, but it looks like it's not doing error checking on this, and maybe I've got that wrong. Let me double check that here. Yeah, input type tell. I did have that right. For some reason I thought it would try to create a field for telephone numbers or something, but Chrome doesn't have that in, and it will submit to whatever you type in. But you can do that for telephone numbers if you wish. Were you saying something earlier? I thought I heard somebody talking up here. Sorry. The voices again, apparently. Okay. So those are some of the different types of inputs. We're going to cover some more in a little bit. But with those, we'll show you some others. So you can mix in IDs with these. So if you want to identify an email, you could, do an ID in your CSS to make it look a little bit different or something. So you can give those IDs. You can also give them sizes, although sizes really kind of is how many letters across, like the letter M across you want to go. But I don't like to do size primarily because I'd rather control that in my CSS with my width, okay? I don't like to do that. But one you can do with this is the max length. And the max length, maybe our email we want to limit to 10 characters long. If I go in here and I just start typing in characters, I'm still typing on my keyboard, but it's no longer typing beyond 10 characters there. So this might be something to kind of help clean your data. Meaning if you're going to do a social security number, there's only so many digits in social security number. Why would you, do more? Would you guys be okay with me going through and highlighting everything here and going into name and copying and pasting that, which would be just hordes and hordes and hordes of text? That doesn't make sense either. Limiting that, is probably a good idea. So when I hit submit, it won't go through. Let me put that and make that an email. It's weird, my @ sign's not working there. What's that? There we go. It's going through. It's being weird for some reason, but I don't want to have all that data going through. So max length might be a good idea to help out with that. Now, can I get around that with that inspect thing I just showed you guys a second ago? I could, right? I could just open up inspect, change my max length to like 1 billion, and then who cares? So it's not like this bulletproof thing by any means, but it does help out, as people are typing in things, but they could get around it if they want. So nothing too crazy. And now if I wanted to have something in, let's say I had a form where I was accepting user data, like a profile page, okay? This is your own profile page. You edit your own page, and when it comes up, it has your email address already in there. And I need to take that max length off. That's my problem. Okay. What you can use is you can use something called value. And so I could say curl@dixie.edu, okay? And when I refresh that page, it comes pre-populated with some text in here. So then I could update it and say, oh no, it's mcurl@gmail.com or something like that. And then I'd hit submit, and it would update the database or whatever was storing this. And the next time I refresh the page, it would pre-populate with that. But when I hit refresh, you can see how it pre-populates with something. Now this is different because when I hit submit, it actually sends that over. Okay? But there's times where you might want to say something like first name and last name. And I don't want people hitting submit and having first name and last name sent back to the server. So we use something that's an HTML5 attribute called placeholder. And placeholder will look like this. So I type in first and last name and I refresh that. Once that saves, it should be working. There it is. You can see when I click on it and I start typing out Matt Curl, it removed that. But not only that, it was a little bit more dim. You see how that has a little gray to it, and this one's really black up here. So it does look a little bit different. But so you can kind of give some promptings on how you want a cell phone to be entered in. Maybe you want to say placeholder is going to equal something like, something like that. And that might be a good placeholder for your cell phone. So they can kind of see how to enter in their cell phone. You guys all with me? Okay. The submit, I don't know what's going on with this. When I hover on it, it gets bigger. Maybe I say applying a padding to my hover. Why that one's not working, that's weird. Because it's still an input. We could also say something like input type equals submit, I think. Now this is another kind of pseudo selector you can use for attributes. You guys go look up CSS selectors. We've talked about this a little bit. You can see here where I'm using this attribute, where I could say if it has the attribute checked or has the attribute target equals something, or has the attribute like we were just using a second ago here, type, then give it some stuff. But I said I want to have my attribute be type equals submit, right? And I think that might actually be more specific for that element here. And apparently it's not. Oh, it still is not. I don't know. I'll have to look at that. That's really weird that that's not. That hover is the only thing that's making that turn on and off. Not sure why that submit's looking like that, but whatever. Okay. So those are some attributes we can add in here. Now let's add another one here. We've been using inputs for the most part. We're going to now use text area. Text area input is a self-containing tag, meaning it doesn't have an ending tag. Okay, and if we're going, again, we're using old XHTML, we do a space slash after the end of that. We've talked about these kind of tags, but HTML5 we don't need it. Text area, you do need an opening and a closing. In here, we are missing a name, so we could have something like comments. Maybe we want to write out comments up above, and maybe add a break tag, and we're going to have comments be in there. And then in here, I'd want to say my text area is going to have a width of 300 pixels and height of 100 pixels or something like that. So save both of those. We'll refresh it, and you can see how comments now are 300 by 100, and I can type out stuff. Now, I do have some issues here where my text is small, and so I would probably want to put in some of my stuff there. With my padding and whatnot. So comments, nope, that's not saved. There it is. So it's a little bit larger, and I have a nice border around as I type. And then when I hit submit, it goes back and gave me the comments now because I was using name in there appropriately. So that's comments. There's some other ones that are dumb and not really used that often. There's another kind of submit that exists out, sorry, not a submit, but one similar to submit, which is called reset. And that just takes anything that you've typed in and blanks it out. You don't see them that often anymore, but they are an older tag, and it has us learn it, but I don't really think you need to learn it. We're going to do another one here, which is common. And this is another input type called checkbox. Okay, and we should give it a name. And maybe we're checking like monster 1 or something like that. And over here we're gonna have, we'll just put next to it like monster 1. I don't remember the monster's names in Stranger Things, but we're just gonna go with that for now. And we'll go through and give some options here. Let's do a break after each of these. So we'll do a monster like 2, 3, and 4, and you need to update these right here, and I'll show you why. And we also need to give it a value. I didn't give that either. Monster 1, and okay, let's leave these all as monster 1 here, and look at this. Okay, so that's weird. I've got some padding going on, or the width on that box. That's my problem there. But I could go through and check these, right? And if I hit submit, you'll see that it said name monster 1 equals monster 1, and monster 2 equals monster 1, monster 3 equals monster 1, and that's because of the value that's being sent back. You know, like up above here, we're saying value equals curl@dixie.edu, and it was feeding that value back into that email form. This is kind of the same thing, and so I really need to make sure that these match whatever I'm sending them. So when it sends that, you know, that variable over, and if I've checked it, so you'll notice the one I didn't check, monster 4, never came across, but the other monsters did. But I needed to update their values to reflect the variable that was being sent back. Now, checkboxes allow us to check multiple items. Let me get rid of this width here for now, because I want those checkboxes to look normal. Still don't know my submit button's looking all dumb, but it is. Take a look at that. That's actually really annoying me. Hang on one sec. Let me figure out why that is not being given the padding. 10 pixels. I don't know. That should totally be taking effect because it is an input, but I don't know. That's really weird. It's not even affecting the size. I might have to add I could add an ID to it or something, but it's really strange. I should probably run my validator quick. Let me look at that. Got a parse error on line 218. That's some of my media query. Oh, it's right here. That one. And I've got some errors here with alt tags and some bad values I need to look at. So that's a good, yeah, I need to get source put in there. That was another thing. It's a good example. Even if you've been doing this for a while, you still write bad code. Okay, so refresh that, and we can check different monsters, and those will come through. And you can see those two there. There are times where I want to only select one thing at a time. For example, maybe I want to have like, you can only pick one monster. And when you want to do that, you set the name to the same thing. And then you give your values 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And what that's going to do, sorry, before I move on, I need to change them from checkbox over to a radio button. And a radio button is like a little dot that you can turn on and off. and looks like this. And now, because they have the same name, it will only let me select one from the group. And when I submit that, it will grab the value of whatever I'm sending and send it through. And I called, these all monster ones. Maybe monster is just a better value name, variable name we can send through, and then it'll just send the monster number that associates with the text over here. Any questions on this one? I know these are a little boring. I get it. But you kind of have to know how to put these through. You can pre-check one if you want. Like, let's say I love Monster 4. I can say checked. And so when I refresh the page on here, it comes pre-checked. So you may want to do that too. Couple more we're going to do. There's not too many left here. We're going to do hidden. A hidden input type looks like this. And this allows us to send data without the user seeing it. So I could say something like, stranger things really scared me, or something like that, okay? And I need to give it a value, secret message, or something like that. Okay, I'll save that quick. We'll go back to the page, we'll refresh it, I'll submit it. And it didn't show up on the main form, but it did come through as data received. So there's times where you're going to want to send hidden data through that the user does not or should not see. Now, again, can they see it if they want to in here? If I pull up the source code, is it in there? A secret message, it is in there, right? Do you see that? But, just viewing it, they're not going to see it. So, again, don't think that that's super secure, because it's not, but you can look at that. So let's a couple more. There's one in here called select. And in here you're going to give options, and you can say monkey. And in here we can give it a value equals monkey. Chimp and ape and I don't know. And we'll update these really quick. Something, and then we'll give it a name and monkey type. Save that. Refresh it. And down, I need to give it a break. And here now, well, I didn't save it, but you can see where I have a combo box here where I can select chimp or something like that, and I can submit that, and that monkey type chimp comes across the board there for us. So you can send stuff through using select, and people can drop down. You can say selected on one of these. If I like ape or something, that's going to be like the default, like we did with checked earlier. You can also add the attribute multiple to this if you want. So I can go in and select multiple ones. If I came in here, actually I need to change the size down to 2, and it'll drop down, and you can select multiple, but you normally don't see those that often being used that way. Let's go through really quick some other input types that exist out there before we move on. I'm going to cover these a little faster than normal because they're not as common, but you can know of them. We've learned type or text in here. We've learned password. We've learned submit. We've learned reset, radios, checkboxes, buttons, typically used with JavaScript, and you just make a button. And this button in particular has a value, click me on it, so you can see how it's changed. And then we have some JavaScript, and we're going to be learning JavaScript in here in a few weeks. Just some brief JavaScript. This one has an event called onClick, which means if I click on the button, then run the function alert that says hello world, and you can see that hello world has come up here. Okay, but you can use buttons if you want to. There's a bunch of new HTML5 input types. We've talked about some of these, but some other ones we haven't. Might be color, where you go through and you select a color on here. Okay, you hit submit, and it will return the hex code for you. You could have some JavaScript that says choose a color, and it would change your background color of your page or something if you wanted it to. There's date, which is really handy, where I can click and have a drop-down calendar now and select a specific date and submit, and it'll send it in the form of a date. Email, we talked about. File, you can send files through and upload files, although there's a lot more to it than just using the input type file. We'll get to that like in a future class. Months, you don't really use. Number, you might see once in a while. It'll allow you to select numbers up and down and not go beyond a min and max value that you've set within its parameters. You can see there's new input restrictions. We've talked about max. Well, we've talked about max length. We talked about, we haven't talked about required. Required will force one to be clicked. So if I have password here, I type out just required, and I try to run that, I try to submit that, it's going to come, well, it didn't that time, but let me refresh it a couple times. Required should be flagging. What's that? Oh, required. Sorry, my bad. You're right. I'm wrong. Submit. No. Required. Did I spell that right? I mean, it should, well, it should just force you to do it. And that looks right. Password required. This is acting weird today, guys. So I have nothing in the password. I hit submit. There it is. So now that I type it out, it'll feed that back in and give me the password. Okay, good. I'm not an idiot. Input type ranges. You can say I want a min and a max and use a slider to default to a number, and that would be 0, and this would be 10, and I hit submit, and it would come in 10, and so you can kind of slide around a value that you want. Search really doesn't do much. Telephone we talked about. Time is kind of like date. URL, those are kind of the main ones there. There's another one. These are well, these are, never mind. There's another one called data list. And this one allows us to go through and give, it's like a combo box where you can have a drop down. But also when you start typing something in, like if I start typing in Internet Explorer, it would just default that and I could click and it would go. You do an input, list browsers, give it a name, and then you have a data list of all the browsers and options you want to feed it. And that just comes in there. Let's see if I'm forgetting anything. I think we're about done. There's an input type image, and you can feed it an image that you could click on, kind of like a button. I'm not going to cover that in depth. Oh, here's some big things. Labels. You'll need this for your homework. Label, you wrap around a couple items, something like this. Okay, and what happens with this is now before when I would click on email, it would not activate this box, okay? When I refresh this now and I click on email, do you see how I hovered over email and that combo box or that box changed colors? Or I could click on it and it activates it to type in. Label allows us to take an element and make it so when I click on the word like monster, it would select that box there. And you do that in two ways. One, you wrap the whole thing in label tags, okay? Like so. Just bring that down. Number two, you can wrap the individual item in label tags. and then give the object an ID that matches a label. This is for, what would that be, email. And I would say its ID is now going to be email. And that's how you associate those two. So now when I click on email, it still works the same way. Your homework is going to have you build that out with labels. And labels are inline elements, and you're going to have to say something like, we're going to have a label called email, and inside of my CSS, maybe I want to, hang on a sec here. Maybe I want to take my label, where are we doing our text areas are up here. Let's take these inputs. Well, those are probably fine for right now. I'm going to take my label and I'm going to apply a float to it, and it's going to float to the left. And so the next item that would come after it would be my input, right? And that input, I probably want to make it, display it as a block. So we have our inputs here, and we'll do display as a block. This should be display as a block, but we'll make sure. And then I probably want to give my label specific width. Let's give it a width of like 100 pixels. Let's see what that looks like quick here. So I've got that up here. I probably want to have that come down a little bit, and so on my label I'm going to give like some margin top applied to it. So do like a margin dash top. Let's look at 10 pixels and see what that looks like really quick. So that looks about right. Now I need to wrap each of these in their own labels, same way as doing before. So password needs to be in there, and I need to probably give it a password there. And then I can give it its label, and the input, I need to give it an ID equals password. I need to get rid of these breaks because I'm now floating and having things kind of shift themselves around. Just clean this up a little bit. And I would continue going down with these down below, but just to see if we can get this working for 2, I'm going to do that. And you can see that password kind of goes right underneath it. And then this item here, we might want to make it, I don't know, maybe turn off that width so it goes across the rest of the page. Let's do that. I'm going to go in here and say, well, I have padding. I don't have any width applied to it, huh? Maybe my form, I'm going to add a border to it. Let's say it's 1 pixel, solid, black, so you can see the form. We didn't actually even show you field set. Field set's another one that exists out there. The way that this one works is you say, or inside my form, I'm going to give it a field set. I'm going to give it a legend. The legend comes up here, and it draws its own little border around. It's also it's an older way of doing things. You don't see it as much anymore, but you can use field sets in there, and we didn't really talk about that one. I think what else I want to do here. Maybe we want to give some padding to the sides of these. We could do that. That section. This is actually not looking too bad, and I could continue down doing things there. Let's say that I wonder what that would look like. Wider form elements. This input width equals 100%. That looks dumb. It's going to go underneath. It doesn't look dumb, but I don't know if we could do like a calc 100% minus, what did I say, 100 pixels. That might be a good idea there, so that these span out all the way. And then we could do some like mobile stuff that when it drops down into a mobile view, they still span the width of the element or something like that. So I could do something there with that width. Now, did I teach you guys calc? Have I ever taught you calc before? Calc is super handy. If you don't know calc, it's going to save a lot of problems with layout. Because I'm saying make my width 100% minus the 100 pixels that I've got inside of my label up above. So it basically says start from here, go all the way across, which would come out to here somewhere, but then goes back 100 pixels to accommodate the space for this one. Calc's awesome. If you know how to use it, it can be really handy. But you got to know what you're doing with it. I don't know why that's hanging off. I'd like to wonder what's up with that too, but it's fine. All right, so I think we've given you a lot. We've talked a little bit about the processors, right? You know, right now this is going out to a .php page. Okay. There's other things out there. There's like another common one is ASP or ASPX. There's old Cold Fusion stuff. There's old Java pages you can send things to. There's a lot of them out there you can interact with. Let's see. Anything else I want to cover here? I think that's about it. Do you guys have any questions at all? Okay, so on your homework, you guys need to build this form. You guys can use something similar to what I was using with these labels and floating them around. Follow the instructions. Make sure you're doing what you need to with those. And your form is going to need a first name, last name, an email, a phone number, graduation date, and comments. The ones with the asterisks need to have that required in them, so it will not submit unless you put that data in. And then when you hit it, it needs to make sure that it's going out using post variables, going to this page, and that I can see all of your data is coming through. Now, if you really want to know how I'm grading, I'm going through and I'll fill out your form, and I'm going to hit submit. Well, I'm going to first hit submit to see if it goes through and requires certain data, and if it doesn't, you know, you're going to lose some points. But then I'm going to fill them out quick, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to make sure that you're using the right variable names, you're using post, and that it's coming to this page. And that's really how I'm going to be looking. And then I'm going to validate. Well, I'll probably validate first. But that's really what I'm looking for when it comes time for grading yours. And this right here is in a mobile view. That's why it kind of looks a little different. But when you're in a desktop or tablet, they'll obviously shift around on those. And so that's that. Any questions? Good luck. We're out of here.